Hey y'all, what is going on? I hope you're having an incredible week so far. I know it has been a little bit since I have done my last podcast. I definitely had intentions and plans to do it last week, and you know what? Life got in the way. Life happens, but it's okay because we're back. We're good. And as always, let's go ahead and kick off this week's podcast with showcasing what I'm wearing my earrings. This pair I've actually had for quite a while. I have a friend who, the backing just came off as we speak. But I had a friend that used to make jewelry, used to specifically make earrings. And it was funny because this is actually where she got started, was like the felt, faux leather type pieces. And then she eventually graduated and started doing what is it like, and of course now I forgot, but anyways, that's beside the point. But she kind of dabbled here and there with acrylics and different things when it came to earrings, and so it was a lot of fun. And she had her business for several years, I believe, and did extremely well. But then it was kind of one of those things that I feel like that she kind of lost her spark and it just wasn't the same anymore. But the really cool part is that actually got her and propelled her into wanting to put herself back through school, and now she's officially a nurse, which is freaking incredible. Um, Resin, of course, ADHD. I knew it was going to come to me eventually, but resin earrings, that's what she got into for quite a while. But I just love these so much, and I've actually have about a handful, if not more, of pairs that she made a long time ago. But these were so cool, and I was trying to honestly find a pair that was like spooky Halloween, um, yeah, and all the things. And of course, I'm rocking the purple today, so I felt like it went really well. But these are a lot of fun. And I don't know if y'all can relate or not, but I'm the kind of person that is already wanting to get out her pumpkins. I don't think I'm going to put away all of our summer decor. We have a lot of floral summer stuff still up in our house, but I feel like I'm going to start integrating in the pumpkins, kind of like how a lot of people do with like Thanksgiving and transitioning into Halloween. Your girl's basically going to be doing the same thing, only it's going to be towards the end of summer, and pumpkins are going to be popping here and there with the summer decor. So I'm going to make it happen. And of course, as always, just do what brings you joy, what brings joy to your heart. But this week's podcast topic, of course, y'all know, if you've been around for a little bit, y'all know one of the things that I definitely do get inspired by here and there is whenever I'm listening to Sunday service. And you are correct. This Sunday service, or this past Sunday service, inspired me, and it was so cool because I have about a list of topics that have kind of kept me on track for at least the last month as far as what maybe I want to talk about or not talk about. And but I like to kind of have a variety of topics to think about, right? And if it feels right, it'll be the topic for the week. And so it just so happened that this week's topic did fall into line with the topic that was talked about on Sunday. And I just love when that happens, right? I just love when I have little sprinkles of God moments like that. But so let's go ahead and dive in. So this week's topic is overcoming doubt and strengthening faith. Woo! So, I mean, right out the gate, let's go ahead and talk about it. So, I feel like there's so many different avenues in our life, whether professional or personal, where I feel like that doubt can easily creep into our lives, right? I feel like whether we're at work, whether we're at home, our relationships that we have with friends, with our spouse, relationships that we have with ourselves, right? Doubt can creep in at any time, any place. And as always, I have like my little notes here to keep me on track. But if you're only going to be happy when things are going to go your way, if I feel like every single one of us has a plan, whether we have a plan or agenda for the day, whether it's for the week, some of us may have lifetime goal plans, right? 5-year plan, 10-year plan. Everyone's different, but in one way, one form or another, right? We have a plan. We have a schedule. We have like my here that I have is my like trusty to-do list for the week, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on paper, we have something, right? And we have a plan. And when we usually have a plan, that means that we have a goal in mind, right? We have an end goal. And let's be transparent here. Most of the time, things don't go according to plan, right? Um, I think it's important to have a schedule, a flow, if we want to call it that, to help us stay the course, right? Stay on track. But I feel like that where things can get a little rocky is whenever we have our mindset so much on that plan, especially if it's that 5 year, 10 year plan, right? Or if you're like myself, I get super hyper fixated on something, and particularly like if it's new and shiny or a new idea or a new opportunity, or something comes to mind, and then I go down this rabbit hole, right, of excitement and planning, and something doesn't go the way I planned, then if I'm not prepared for that, if I'm not in the right headspace, which is most of the time, it is like a punch in the gut, right? And then we're filled with fury and disappointment. And we're wondering, when am I going to catch a break? When are things going to go my way? When am I going to be happy again? When is success going to come my way? When is that job promotion going to happen, right? When am I going to find somebody that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with? When am I going to find that friend that everyone always is talking about, their best friend? They have a friend, they have a best friend, they have a gal pal, they have a bro, they have a good friend that they hang out with and they're having fun with. When am I going to have my turn, right? All the things. I feel like every single day, every hour of every minute, we have moments when we're wondering why. Why? When is it going to be my turn? When is it going to be my turn to be a parent, right? When is it going to be my turn to just catch a break, to be able to get that job promotion, to be able to take that vacation? I feel like that it's important to have goals in mind, but also I feel like it's important for us to be very self-aware that things are not always going to go the way we want them to. And I honestly feel like if you are watching this and you've never had a time in your life when you had something planned, when you had an idea of something that you were so excited and you're like, I just know it in my bones, in my heart, that this is the way it's going to go, that it didn't happen like that. I find it very rare that somebody could actually tell me that they've never experienced that before. And you know what? If you're watching this and you can safely say, I've never had that experience before, I've never been let down, I've never been disappointed, then my God, you are one of the lucky ones. If you're only going to be happy when things go your way, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. Let's be honest. We're setting ourselves up for disappointment because most of the time, like I said earlier, things are not going to go our way. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, like I said earlier, to have a plan. Because I feel like in order to have a plan, it means that we're being productive, right? We're being productive. We're making sure that we're creating healthier habits, right? We're making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable and that we're taking steps necessary, baby steps, to where I've said before, where it's important for us to walk before we run. I've said that a lot recently, I feel like. And I feel like it goes the same for like when we have a plan, when we have a goal in mind. I feel like it's important because we're setting ourselves up for disappointment if we're only focused when things are going to work out the way we want them to. And I feel like that takes work, right? I feel like that if I'm thinking about myself in particularly, and I think about moments when I have had plans, when I have had dreams or goals in mind, and that has been derailed, right? Whether life happened, whether somebody, maybe there have been times before where I can think about people in my life that I've gotten super excited about something that I wanted to share with them, and without even thinking, maybe perhaps it's not the right time to share it with them, or maybe they're not the right person. Whether it's ADHD or whether I'm excited to get that euphoric feeling, like that good old pat on the back, gold star situation. My thought process I just surpass all that. And then I usually just go to the first person in line that happens to come into my company in that day. And I just blurt it out like word vomit. And I share with them the excitement that I have about something. And here is the thing. that one thing that you have in mind that you're wanting to accomplish, that one thing that you're wanting to achieve, that small, whether it's a big 10-year type goal, or whether it's something that you're really working hard on this season of your life or this month currently. The thing is that I'm going to let you in a little secret. There is no one, not one person, that's going to be as excited or determined to make sure that you get that one thing done more than you. That is the one thing that I've learned the hard way, is that, and it's not necessarily putting down those that are in our community, in our circle, whether it's our spouse, whether it's our friend, whether it's a family member. I'm sure as you're watching and listening to this right now, you were thinking about that one person that comes to mind, right? That one person that just automatically popped in your mind. Here's the thing, is that as excited as we may be to share that thing with somebody, I think it's important for us to first check in with ourselves, to take a breath. Because if you're like me and I get super excited about things, it's almost like this feeling that just starts bubbling up to the surface, and then it becomes so overwhelming, so powerful, that if I just don't get it out and share it with somebody, I'm going to explode, right? I'm going to explode with excitement. And that's normally whenever I do just blurt it out to whoever's in my path. And most of the time, majority of the time, they're not going to be as excited and pumped up like I am, and they don't match my excitement. And then what happens? We go, we get disappointed, right? We get disappointed, we get mad, we get furious, we're let down. We feel like that the world is against us. We feel like that person is against us because they're not matching our energy. And if you haven't met this person yet that can match your energy, trust me, if you haven't met them yet, they're out there, and it's incredible when you do. But if you haven't, then that's where I recommend writing it down, journaling it, sharing it with somebody, if you can, with somebody that's confident, your confident person that you know that you can trust. But just put it out into the universe. Write it down. I love writing things down. I love talking it out loud, even if it's by yourself. Even if say it in prayer, put it in prayer, talk to God about it, put it out into existence, because the more that we talk about it, the more that we give life to that thing that we want to manifest, right? We want to happen. We're giving life, we're breathing life into it. Then that's where I feel like we're going into like the right direction. But then I feel like that if we're not open-minded to the fact that a blessing could come our way and it's going to look a little bit different than what we had in mind, or we had a plan of the way things that wanted to go, and then God was like, because I have a different plan for you. And I feel like that if we get hung up on and fixated and stuck on the way that we want things to go, and we're not willing to be open-minded, an open vessel to maybe the opportunity that something bigger is coming our way, if we get closed-minded to the fact that things didn't really work out for me, things didn't go the way that they were planned, if we don't look at the bigger picture, right? If we're not looking at the bigger picture, and we're like this, and we're closed-minded, and we're only viewing into the one way, and they're like, it didn't go my way, it's my way or the highway, it didn't work out for me, it didn't go the way I wanted it to, and therefore I'm ultimately disappointed, I'm shutting down, I'm mad, I'm furious, and the world is against me. If we have that mentality, let me tell you, you're going to miss out on 10 times more blessings. You're going to miss out on maybe the bigger picture of why things didn't go your way, and that something else bigger is in store for you. And I would hate for you to miss out on that. I would hate for that moment to surpass you. One of the toughest things that we're told that we have to keep in mind, but it is a tough pill to swallow, it's a tough one, is that it's God's plan, not ours. It's his timing, not ours. So it's God's plan, not mine, and it's his timing, not mine. Timing, y'all, is everything. And it still fascinates me to this day how there are seasons in my life when time just seems to be flashing before my eyes, and there are other seasons in my life where time really could speed up, because I don't want to stay and stuck in that moment, that season of my life, because it just feels like everything is going at a slower pace, and it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable. And I feel like that in the moment, it's like I feel like we have this goal and we have this plan, right? And then if the goal or the plan doesn't work out, then the other direction that we can go in is that what's God's plan. I feel like that's the most important. And I feel like I like to believe too that God wants us to have a foundation. Like he wants us to set ourselves in a way of having those goals and having a plan, but not getting to the point where we're like obsessively focused on, no, I can't do this because I'm so focused on this goal. This goal is all I can think about. I'm eat, breathing, and sleeping all day, and I'm not allowing for anything to come in between, and I'm missing those moments. And I'll be the first to say that whenever I first started as a independent Cincy consultant, I will say one thing for sure is that the business definitely did keep my head afloat from darker times that were ahead for myself and not only my personal life, but my life and everyone that surrounded me. But at the same time, it got to where I was so consumed by it. I was wanting it to consume me that I got to a point where it was like, okay, well, how do I make sure that I'm fitting Cincy into my everyday life and not the other way around, because it did serve its purpose for the time being. But then it got to where it was like, okay, well, things are a lot better than they were. I'm in a better place mentally, spiritually, physically. How can I break this apart to where I'm fitting it into my life and I'm not accommodating my life to fit into it? You know what I'm saying? And that took some work, because then I had to realize at that point that, and I tell y'all, I mean, almost every season, I mean, we're talking like possibly every couple months, maybe every week, like over and over and over, when there are things that I'm wanting to accomplish and I'm wanting to get done, or things that I'm really focused on, whether it's business driven, whether it's personal, I have had to pivot and turn over and over and over like a puzzle piece, y'all, because I'm like, I make a decision or I want to do something and then it doesn't fall through. And then I have to pivot and be like, it's not my plan, it's God's plan. And I have to just keep reminding myself that over and over and over. Even in the moments when I don't even believe it myself, I have to make sure and again speak it into existence, and I have to say it out loud, because even when I'm going through seasons where I just don't want to hear it, right? Like I want to do this. I still have to talk it out loud. I still have to process it, because that is the way that it is. But I can also testify and say that there have been times in the past in my life where I trusted him throughout the process. I trusted God throughout the process of where he was taking me, because I had been there before where I come out on the other side of things. And because of that, I'm able to directly reflect my attention back to what was and what became of those situations. And know, I'm like, you know what? God, you're Jesus, you're walking me through this again. It's a whole nother season. It's a whole nother situation, but I trust you because you've gotten me through it before and you're going to get me through it again. Okay. And I feel like that's a blessing for sure, to be able to have something to kind of fall back on. And the thing is that if that's not you right now, I feel like that if you think about somebody else in your life, think about somebody else that you've spoken to that have shared either maybe like their testimony, or they've shared a blessing that's come their way, or maybe something that unexpectedly happened in their life, right? Like we really thought that something was going to go one way, but then it's pretty crazy and wild how it ended up taking like a direct turn, and it still worked itself out, but maybe not necessarily in the way that you thought it would. It's important for us to surrender how we think something is going to happen. I am so notorious for that. I don't know about y'all, but the way that my imagination works is a lot of times like I'll play out scenarios in my head before they're even happening. And a lot of times I like to practice conversations that I'm going to have with somebody, especially if it's somebody that I'm not really that familiar with. Kind of like an interview process. And there are times where I'm like, okay, what are topics that we can talk about? How do I see this interaction playing out? And I feel like that a lot of times that does help with like my anxiety. I feel less anxious about the situation. But also I think it's important On the other hand, again, we go back to that open-mindedness, right? To be open-minded and surrender to the idea of open possibility. And that is very scary. I'm not even going to sugarcoat that. Like, I'm not even going to deny it. That is something that it's like, it's one of those things that where they say, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I feel like that's one of those things. It's just surrendering. You know how a lot of times, like, you may have heard, like, people who are like an altar call, and they go to the altar, or they're in church services and they're worshiping the Lord, and they feel called to just surrender. I feel like there have been multiple times, at least in the last 4 or 5 years of my life, where I've had to surrender in one way or another because it's just so consuming. It's just too much for me alone to take, to where feel like I have no other option but to surrender and just be like, hands up, I surrender, hands up, I'm good. Um, like, Jesus, take the wheel, because I ain't doing it anymore. I'm not doing it. I can't do it. Someone else is going to have to take over. I feel like I've had multiple situations like that in my personal life. Some examples, and speaking of my personal life, some examples that I feel like I've had to surrender, because I will be the first to say that there have been a lot of times in my life where I like to say that instead of allowing Jesus to take the wheel, I took control over the wheel. It was like, no, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. Things are happening a little too slow for me, not fast enough at my pace, or the fact that I'm like, you know what, I have to make things happen. I have to make moves. So it's important for me to take matters into my own hands, and I'm making my own decisions. And let me tell you that tell God, tell him that you're going to take matters into your own hands, and that you're going to make your own decisions and make way, because you don't even know, and he is going to send you back 10 steps back, let me tell you, because I, over and over, was just so stubborn so many times, y'all. And it was like, I'm sick of the way things are going. I'm going to make this decision. I'm not going to pray over it. I'm going to make the decision for myself, and I'm just going to follow through with it. And what's crazy is that I love picturing how God was just sitting back in the back seat of this vehicle, right, of my life, and was like, you know what? Humor me for a little bit. I'm just going to let you make the decision. And then you feel powerful, right? Like, you feel good. Like, I've made this decision for my life. I'm taking matters into my own hands. I am the captain of my sails, and we're going to see this through, right? And you feel good. But then what happens? You get a swift kick from behind. And a lot of times you fall down, right? And that's what happened to me every single time I fell down. And what would I do? What do you do when you fall down, right? You get back up, you dust your knees off, you dust your hands off, and you're like, you know what? Okay, I hear you loud and clear. Let's do it your way. And I, over and over and over, have had to learn that lesson 10 times over. Some examples in my own personal life where I have thought that didn't have to surrender, and then when I did, it was hella tough. But for example, I, right out the gate out of high school, had this big plan for myself, right? Like I talked earlier about having a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. Well, right outside of high school, I had this fantasy of just automatically getting married. Like, forget college, I'm going to get married. And that's not necessarily saying that that's a bad thing to get married at a young age, but I feel like that it's so important and so imperative, and just speaking for myself, it's so important, so imperative to kind of analyze, like, where is my maturity? Why do I want to get married now? What's the purpose of this? What's purpose driven for me to jump and then automatically get married at a young age? And you know what? Looking back on it, I realized now that I feel like that it was just kind of the excitement of it. It was the excitement of planning it and saying that you're engaged, right? And that you're going to get married. And it was just kind of the idea of it. And what I had no clue about was the work that would come afterwards. And I feel like that getting married at such a young age, especially looking back now on all of like the trials that I was put through, all of the hard seasons that I was put through at such a young age, is that I feel like that God definitely had a hand in it when it was like, no, it's too soon. You're too young. Because I had a lot to work through, and I was already carrying, as I know now, so much kind of like they say, like baggage into my life at that point. And there were very like pivotal things that were happening to me at that age where I just feel like that had I got married around that age, like 18, 19, 20ish, around that time, I feel like that I would have no sooner been divorced as quick as I was married. I had no business getting married back then. And I feel so blessed. I feel very fortunate to have not made that decision early on. And like I said, I do have friends that did get married 18, 19, 20, and they're still married to this day. And that's not knocking that. Let's not get that confused. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that it's not for everyone. And I feel like that I was just so thankful that I ended up waiting and just kind of deciding from there, like, what else am I going to do with my life, and it's different for everyone. But I feel like it's important to not rush into anything. And I feel like it's important to, like, kind of like how I did, I just take a step back and I was like, what is the why do I want to do this? And I think that's the important determining factor as far as where to go from there. Also, when it came to my education, one of the things that I had to surrender on is that I was hell bent and determined when I got outside of high school that I wanted to go to designer school. I wanted to go either into like fashion design, marketing. I was very fascinated with not only fashion design in itself, but really putting together themes and window displays when it came to department stores. That was definitely one of my specialties. But just the idea of going off to like a new state, a new school, and most importantly, getting like my degree within like the fashion design school. Whether it was, like I said, like window merchandising, whatever the case may be. I was super excited about it. And at that time, I was willing to do whatever it took to make sure that I got to, go to design school. And I remember I even applied. I know I applied to FITM in California, and I feel like there was another school that I applied to as well. And I just had this kind of like fantasy in my mind where that was where my really big goal was that I not only wanted to go across the country and have like a completely different experience than the small town that I grew up in, but also I love the idea of being able to pursue a passion that I had, and that it was something that it just felt really like it was what I was meant to do. And that was one of those things, again, at that time that I had a plan, and my plan fell through. And, when I shared earlier about how it's important that you're very careful about who you share your dreams and aspirations and big ideas with, that was one of those things. That, here I am, I born and raised in a small town. Nobody in this area that I lived in and I grew up in, you didn't really hear of something like that. Fortunately, I did have two people that I went to school with that ended up actually going outside. They went outside, and they actually do currently live outside the U.S. and have a job, the country that they live in. And then I did have a friend that actually did pursue her degree in fashion design, which was really cool. And and it's actually something that she does to this day in her industry. And but other than that, growing up, I didn't really hear about a lot of people that went off to college, and or not even really just college, but just went off and pursued the job of their dreams. The area that I'm in, and that I grew up in, was really practical. You find a practical job. You find something that's going to put food on the table, a roof over your head, and dreamers. No, forget that. Forget dreams. Forget having aspirations. It's like, what's practical? What's, automatically going to get your foot in the door, kind of situation. And that, to me is really sad. It was something that over the last 10 years or so that I've really had to work hard on to figure out what are my dreams, what are my aspirations, what are things that are going to light that fire right within me and get me excited to be able to show up. Because I knew it existed. I knew that it was out there. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was, but I knew that there was something out there for me that I was meant to do that's very purpose driven, that I would wake up maybe not every day, but almost every day and get excited and find something that I truly love and enjoy about it. And I knew that it was out there, but at the time, I just didn't know what that was. And I feel like if you're watching this, if you find that you're in a season of life where you're figuring out what it is that you're wanting to do, what your passion is, what is something that maybe you're in a middle of a job change, or you're looking for a new job, or you're needing just a job, period. I feel like that it's important to me, and it's not to say that it's going to be easy, but a number one determining factor for me is it's something that I'm going to be able to get something out of. Especially with like ADHD, for real though, y'all. Like, I knew that I needed to find something and do something with my life that was going to not only bring meaning to it, but something that I could find just purpose with. Something that kind of aligned with not only like my goals, but my personality and just who I am overall as a person. The other thing that I feel like that I had to surrender to, and I have briefly spoken about this off and on through a couple of podcasts, was whenever my husband and I first got married, the first year we had decided that we were going to put off the fact that we were going to wait to have children and grow our family. At the time, the first year of our marriage, we were like, it doesn't make sense to do this. We had a small apartment. We were both working really long hours at our jobs, and it just didn't make any sense. But then we go into year two, okay? Different story. Year two, for the next almost 2.5 years. Let's see, 3, 4. Yeah, so almost 2.5, 3 years into that, we tirelessly were looking for different ways, different things to help us have a baby. And for me personally, it was one of those things that, remember I was talking earlier about how there are things in my life where I can get consumed by it, right? And we get so determined by our plan, not God's plan. And it's the way we want things to go. And I feel like that I got so wrapped up in the idea of growing a family that I was eat, breathing, and sleeping how to get pregnant, basically. And I was looking up research, and I was taking vitamins, right? And for a whole year, like, I remember the first wake up call for us was when we found out, like, I needed to get off birth control. So I was off birth control for a whole year, and they were like, for as long as you're on birth control, that's about as long as you have to wait for it to get out of your system, right? So that was one of the things. And then not to mention how it was like, okay, it was almost like a little checklist. And it was like, okay, well, I'm going to try this out. And okay, we're not pregnant yet. So then I'm going to move to the next thing, and so on and so forth. And then it got to where it was like, okay, enough is enough. Why is this not happening? I've done everything that everyone has told me. I've talked to my doctor about it. I've prayed about it. I talked to God about it. Like, I just don't understand. Like, this is something that I'm speaking into existence and I wanted it to happen, and it feels right. Why is it not happening? What's wrong with me? Why is it happening to everybody else, but it's not happening to me? And unfortunately, that took me into a very dark, deep, dark time. And I got to where I just was questioning everything. And I was questioning my faith. I questioned decisions that I had made in the past. I was wondering, you can't help but wonder, why am I being punished, right? Like, this is the one thing that I can feel in my bones that I'm meant to do. I was created to give birth, to have a baby. And it's like, it gets to the point to where you're eat, breathing, and sleeping it, and it's all you can see. You're just consumed by it all the time. Not to mention the fact that, I don't know if y'all knew this, but maybe you do, maybe you don't. But there are little strips that you can basically do your business on, and you can scan it on your phone, and it tracks your hormone levels. And your girl did that for almost a solid year. And I thought about, I lost my ever loving mind. That was the last straw for me, y'all, was those strips. Because it's false hope. Because you get to where your numbers are high and you get super excited about it, and you're like, well, maybe this is the time, because you're tracking ovulation, you're tracking um your numbers, like how high is my count and all the things. And of course, here I am, ADHD, right, where I'm like hyper fixated on the fact of that it's research and I get to track numbers, and so all these little bing 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 moments are going off for me, because I'm getting these what is it, euphoric type feelings, right? Where I'm feeling really good, and I'm like, you know what? I'm in control. No, I'm not. Like, I'm in control of my body. I'm in control how things are going to go. And I'm going to determine whether or not I am going to be able to get pregnant. Well, that's not how things work, right? And I got to a point where, going back to talking about surrendering and surrendering to how we think things are going to happen and how things are going to go, it just got to a point where I was just tired of crying all the time. I was so sick of being sick and tired, to where I didn't want to show up to my friends' baby showers. I couldn't even talk about babies. I didn't want to see like TV shows or movies or anything media related. And then it just got to where it's like, enough is enough. Like, I just got tired of people asking and talking about it. And then to where I was just like nearly almost like pulling my hair out, because I was just like done. I was done with it. And then it got to where I was like, you know what? I'm tired of feeling like this. I'm so exhausted and tired of feeling like that I am not enough, that my body is not enough, that my body is betraying me, because the one thing that I feel like I was supposed to do, I'm not able to do. So then you go down this rabbit hole of trying to think about, what is my purpose, right? Like, if I'm not able to do this, you feel like that there's nothing next. Like, there's not a next. There's nothing else. It's like, well, it's either this or nothing. And then you just feel like, then you get to the point to where you're just so disappointed in yourself that you just feel numb on the inside. And then I got to where I was like, you know what? I have to surrender to God. I remember there was a moment where I was watching Sunday service here at home again. And I remember I was home by myself, and I just was uncontrollably crying. And I'll never forget this, that there's only been one other time in my life when not only have I surrendered to God, but I remember getting on my knees in the living room and just opening my arms wide. And I was like, my body was just so physically and mentally exhausted. I remember almost kind of like hunching over, because I just had nothing else to give. And I was just like, mentally, it was just surrendering to Him. And it was like, I'm putting this into your hands. I'm tired of trying to take matters into my hands. It's exhausting. And what little energy I have left, I need to muster just to keep myself in my mental state afloat. So that was a lot in itself, to be able to trust not only in God's plan, but His purpose and His perfect timing, and to surrender and be like, you know what, it's in your hands. However you want to see this play out, I trust in you. That is one of the toughest things, one of the hardest things I feel like that I've had to do in my life thus far. Another thing that came to mind for me that I thought about, when it comes to trusting His plan, right, is that there was a time in my life where I was actually a youth leader, and I got so excited, and I felt like that, again, I had found my purpose, and this was something that I was called to do, and I really wanted to pursue it. And plans fell through. It didn't go the way I wanted it to. I did it for, I think I was involved with the youth in our church for about like a quarter of the year. And at that point, the person that was over the youth department at that time, we didn't see eye to eye on several matters, and it fell through. And it was one of those things that I didn't see coming. And of course, here I go again, where I'm getting mad at God. I'm getting mad at myself. I'm getting mad at everybody else, because I just don't understand. Like, here I am again, where I feel like I'm living a purposeful life. Good things are happening, and all of a sudden it gets taken from me again. So, most of the time, we're not going to understand it. I feel like we're not supposed to understand it. The way things go, the way life happens, There are the circumstances and things that happen that we're just not supposed to understand. God hasn't delivered us yet because he has bigger plans for us. If what you have in mind for your goal, if something that you have worked tirelessly on, if you are still praying about it, if you're still waiting for it to come into existence, God has something bigger for us. He has something bigger for us. And we have to trust in his plan to know that if something fell through, something didn't go the way that we wanted it to, it's because he has something bigger in store in line for us. One of my favorite sayings that's not only in the Bible, but it's a quote as well that I see all the time is walk by faith and not by sight. And I love so much because my team name for Cincy is team, of course, Faith and Soul. And I love so much that the podcast of this name became Unscrambled Faith as well. But walk by faith and not by sight. I feel like that's so important. Faith is something that we feel on the inside. If you were to close your eyes right now and you were able to just take a deep breath and just let it go, and to be able to be still in the silence, and to let all of the thoughts, all the negativity, all the thoughts, all the things that's keeping us in a chokehold from the day, anything that somebody has told us, anything that somebody negatively has put in your direction, maybe something that you heard today that you weren't supposed to hear, whatever the case may be that happened today that makes you feel like you are just tightly bounded up. It's important for us to take a deep breath in, and then when we release that breath, to let go of all of that negativity that happened to us today. That, my friend, is what I call faith. That is faith. It's something that you can't explain. It's something that you don't always see. It's something that you feel, that you carry within you. Sight is something that's physically happening in front of you. And it's the things that are not always going to happen. The supernatural is something that I feel like that we walk by faith, that we're feeling, right? We're not always going to see it, but we can feel it. When you feel that you're in over your head, like I've talked about, there's many times in my past that I have felt like I'm drowning, that I'm in over my head. God is still in control. Even in moments when it feels like he has forsaken you, that he has left you, that you just can't physically feel his presence, he is still in control. God's plan isn't always taking us away from the situations that we're in. And that, my friends, is one of, by far, I feel like the hardest thing. When we are in a tough season in our life, or we're in a situation where we feel like we can't get out of it, no matter what that looks like, God isn't always going to take us out of that situation. Sometimes it's something that he has to put us in the middle of for us to be able to get to the bigger picture. And it's so tough because there's a lesson to be learned from the trials and tribulations that were put in. And the hard part, I feel like, is that a lot of times we're in the midst of the storm. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear what lesson is to be learned in this moment. But I guarantee you, friends, that once you get to the other side of things, once you continue following the light when you're in the darkest time in your life, the other side of it is when you're going to see the plan that he had for you all along. And it's okay. It's okay if you're going through a moment in a season of your life where you just can't. That hope, that faith is just as small as a mustard seed. It's okay because it's still there. It's still there. If you can still feel it, it's still there. And that's all you need. I can't help but think of the song when I was listening to the church service. I couldn't help but think of the song, Carrie Underwood, Jesus Take the Wheel. In fact, that's what I used the analogy earlier, was that I've always, for my personal life, have used the analogy that I was in the car and Jesus was in the passenger side, and I wasn't allowing him to take control of my life. I don't want to hand over control over my life. And I feel like that was a direct narrative to not only the way that I was raised, but like the household that I was in, and that there were things and circumstances that happened to me as I was growing up through my adolescent years into my preteen teen years that I didn't have control over. And because of that, I feel like that once I became more of like an adult, then it was like, okay, there are things that I can take matters into my own hands and I can make these decisions for myself. And what I wasn't allowing, I wasn't allowing God first. I wasn't actually having that conversation with him. I was like, no, thank you though. I already have a plan. This is the way I'm going to do it. And you're just going to have to take a seat and then just watch it happen. And boy, did he. Um, but the lyrics alone for that song, I feel like is so true. False in the line with, let go and let God, let Jesus take the wheel, you know, stop having such a strong grip on determining everything that's happening in our lives because that is so exhausting. Sometimes the easier way may seem to take matters into our own hands, right? That just over and over and over, y'all. I feel like that it was so much easier. It seems so much simpler for me to take matters into my own hands. But we will find that we end up hitting a brick wall time and time again. Talking about how I just kept falling down over and over, right? What is the song by I know I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like Chubbawa or whatever it was back in the 90s, where it was like I get back down and I get up again. You ain't never gonna keep me down. That's what I kind of feel like is like in our lives, as many times as we keep getting knocked down, it's important for us to get back up, dust ourselves off, and just keep trucking on. But we may find again that we end up hitting that wall and we alter the trajectory of our lives, right? I feel like that was kind of like what I was saying earlier. There have been so many moments in the seasons of my life where I wanted to take control and I tried to. And because of that, it altered the trajectory of what possibly God could have had in store for me. But when I took matters into my own hands, it was almost like, oh, well, that moment, that part could have went a little differently. Words are hard. But instead, it's like he's like, Megan, you decided to take matters into your own hands. I had this plan for you, but you decided that you wanted to do things your way. And so I'm going to let you do it your way for a while, and we're going to let you play that out. And let's just see how that goes. And I feel like in a way that like I like to believe that that's what God does, is he lets us have a little bit of power. He lets us have the reins for just a smidge of a little bit of a time. And then at that point, he's like, you know what? You still haven't learned your lesson. So I'm going to put this in your path. And typically, that's a lesson that we're not too happy about, right? That we're not too thrilled about. Sometimes we can get so consumed by the things that we're wanting, I want, that we lose sight of the fact that God hasn't actually forgotten about the fact that he hadn't forgotten about us. I feel like that we get so lost in the fact of the things that we're wanting, like the void that we're wanting to fill, that empty void. So it's materialistic type things that we're wanting to put into fruition, that I feel like that because of that, we lose sight of the fact that God has not forgotten about us. That he hears everything that we think about, everything that we're asking him for. But at the end of the day, we have to surrender what we want the most at the altar. Kind of like the idea that I wanted to have a child. I wanted to have a baby so bad. And the fact that I knew that, obviously I do know that there are ways that I could have taken matters into my own hands. But I feel like at the end of the day, for me personally, not speaking on anybody else's behalf whatsoever, I have to make sure I say that, is that for myself and myself only, that it was imperative for me to leave the fact that I wanted to be a mom at the altar, because I have to trust that God has a plan for me, and that even if I don't see that plan, just to trust the fact that it's going to show up in the right time, right? Because it's his time, not my time. When we get hung up on what God has not provided us, we don't see the blessings that are occurring right in front of our eyes. And that's the one thing that I hope that you can take away from this, is that yes, it's fine to have goals. Yes, it's great, and I encourage you to have a plan and to have something in mind of what you want for your life, right? Whether it's something that's a bigger picture, something that you're like, well, I don't know if this is ever going to happen, but I really want to have like my own beach house one day, or I really want to have my own car. I really want to own that house one day. whatever the case may be. There's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like that if we're not being mindful of the time, if we're not being mindful of just the everyday, what's going to happen is we're going to lose sight of the small blessings that God is dropping into our lives on a day-to-day basis. Whether that's someone that you're passing in the store, in the hallway, whether it's a coworker that may need a leg up, they may need a smile, they're maybe looking for a compliment, they're maybe having a tough time at home. Maybe it's a student, if you're a teacher, maybe it's a student that is just acting up over and over and over, and they're just crying out just to be seen, right? Just to be seen, just to be heard. There's blessings I feel like that happen to us on a day-to-day basis, but when we have our heads in the clouds, or when we have our head facing down, and we're like, oh, why me? I'm having the worst day ever. I was just talking to a friend about this today, is that it's okay for us to have moments in our days when we do feel like that we are having the worst day ever. But God will quickly find somebody and put them in your path to make you realize that somebody out there is having a worse day off than you are. And most of the time, it's almost the inevitable for us to not, we can't even avoid the fact that He's putting these people in our lives, right? Well, thank you all so much for hanging out with me. Once again, it's been a pleasure, and I can't wait till the next podcast. Make sure and give me a thumbs up on this video. If you haven't already subscribe so that way you're in the know for whenever the next podcast comes in. So thank y'all so much for hanging out with me. I hope y'all have an incredible rest of your week ahead. And don't forget to unscramble your faith and find clarity in the chaos.